Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College. Welcome to Civil Society, where we explore issues affecting our communal well-being through a nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACCTV. My guest today is Rabbi Neil Blumofe. Together we'll explore how we can each help heal the world and why it's important. Rabbi Blumofe is Senior Rabbi at Congregation Agudas Achim. He is a well-respected leader in the community, both in the Jewish and general communities, and known as a forthright and fearless advocate for social justice, and an optimist. On his congregational website, he states, and I quote, "I believe that our best days are before us as we continue to learn and share experiences with each other." Most recently, he has traveled around the U.S. with the Reverend Darrell Horton to draw attention to the divisive issues that continue to pull at the threads of our country. Gandhi urged us all to be the change that you wish to see in the world. Rabbi Blumofe does so through his active public service in the Texas Freedom Network, as past president of the Interfaith Action of Central Texas, and as a past fellow of Rabbis Without Borders. He's involved in interreligious activities and in many other ways that time does not allow mentioning. Rabbi Blumofe is also a classically trained pianist and a jazz composer who has released 2 albums. He frequently hosts the Cactus Cafe's Views and Brews and has a nationally distributed weekly podcast called Liner Notes about the significance of jazz. He holds rabbinic ordination from the Academy for Jewish Religion and the Jewish Theological Seminary, and an MA in Bible in ancient Semitic languages. He is also in the faculty of the Austin Presbyterian Seminary. Rabbi Blumofe, as you can see, is a busy fellow. So, is it okay, Rabbi, if I call you Neil?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
So, many of our viewers won't know what a rabbi does. So what is it that you actually do in the congregation? I've been trying to figure that out, and in the community.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really happy to share this time with you. Rabbi is a Hebrew word which means teacher, and very often I'm invested in teaching at all levels of education, from preschool through the sage age of learning. And in addition, one of the great privileges I get to do is to be able to take care of a community at all stages of life cycle, from birth to coming of age, to marriage, to death. And the ability to help and be part of people's lives is a very important aspect of how I consider myself a leader in the Jewish community. In addition, being in Austin, it's a really wonderful place to be able to be availed of the great ways of connecting to the larger community as well, and utilizing Judaism not only as a specific religion, but also as a wisdom-based philosophy or a way of living for a larger group, for the larger city. So
you're a jazz pianist, and I believe you play other instruments as well?
I have played certainly until I've come in contact with real musicians and allow them to do what they do best, and to be able to connect to them and to share the gifts that I might have as well, showcasing what they do.
Do you see any connection between jazz and what you do as a rabbi in terms of Judaism?
Very much so. I think a great jazz musician is one who is aware of his surroundings or her surroundings, one who employs emotional intelligence, and one who recognizes that improvisation is the way that one lives. Very often we may plan our days thinking that we're going to have a particular day, and an event or something may change that drastically. And I think the ability to have the wherewithal to see who we are, and how we adapt to things unplanned allow us to have a fuller life, and one of meaning as opposed to one of constant disappointment and regret.
It's interesting because just the other day I was talking to somebody and we're talking about Judaism and jazz, believe it or not. And as I described, my understanding, she says, "Oh, Judaism is intellectual jazz." So that's kind of interesting.
I think that is interesting. I think, though, that to be effective, Judaism has to be much more than intellect. I think that's a backbone of Judaism. Right. I think a spiritual living, and just as jazz is not just entertainment, it's a very important way of living as well, and I think they do have a lot in common.
So you and Reverend Darrell Horton took upon yourselves to travel around the country. Can you describe what you were trying to accomplish in doing that, and what's your experience been?
For sure, thank you. Reverend Horton and I have a nice relationship. We met in the interreligious, interfaith world of Interfaith Action of Central Texas, IACT. And he's at Mount Zion Baptist Church. And we were thinking at this particular moment to ways for our community to continue to get together. We have shared many different things over the years. Community would visit different places and different places of worship, ask questions. And we thought, in conjunction with the recent opening of the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, that we thought we'd get a couple of busloads of community members to go. And then while we were talking, we kind of said, well, why don't we just do that and see what happens? And let's model for everyone else in this day of social media presentation how that can happen. So a trip was born of allowing us not just to go to Montgomery for a day or two and come back, but to have the capacity to get to be in a car trip together. And it's not just visiting a particular place, it's the conversations and the magic that happens when you're invested in a relationship with someone for so long. And we did get to know each other very, very well. And that was one trip. The next trip we took the next year was a trip to the north to show that the questions that we're asking about our country, the ways that we're asking that we are to regard each other are not limited to a geographic region. And we have things brewing again for this coming year as well.
So what is your, what would you like to have happen as a result of the trip?
Well, I think I'd like people to see that it's possible to connect beyond our own busyness, our own obligations, to people who one may not naturally connect to based on, again, who we are in life, and to make that extension of friendship. And in that extension of friendship, to recognize that we have a lot in common and a lot of questions that can be asked together. And just again, like in a great jazz ensemble, where you bring wonderful, diverse, talented soloists together, then the ensemble can make great music together. And I would hope that by watching Reverend Horton and I, other people would decide to have those kinds of experiences together too, and from there to have that be multiplied in a way that softens our stance against the other and to allow this world to be better.
So what were there challenges? I mean, here's a black minister. I almost said Jewish rabbi, as if there's any other kind, and a rabbi, white, getting together. Were there challenges in dealing with issues?
Well, I think Reverend Horton and I have a really good relationship, and again, being in a car with someone for hours allows one to begin to have conversations about privilege, about background, about hopes and aspirations. And the good news is that I think at a certain level people are all the same, and one can recognize the complexity that one has. We're living in a particular place, and the stereotypes that we may have are fragile at best. So I don't know if there was a problem. I think there was great opportunities for us to see truly that even though we are certainly, he's a committed Baptist and I'm a committed Jewish person, that we in our sense of love of community and our sense of the recognition and the awe of the divine, we have actually a lot in common.
So you may have already covered this, but so what would be the lessons learned that you would like people to know about that trip?
Well, that I think, again, that I think our future is ahead of us, and the ability that we have to participate in conversations about our country, about our civic responsibility, about the state of the world, are for us to be involved in, as opposed to just react to on the computer or on social media. We have the ability, whether you can get in a car or get on an airplane or host somebody at your house for a lunch or a dinner, to be able to really immerse in the ability to affect a dynamic shift in how we consider the world to be, and not rely on others to do that for us.
So basically be human.
I would, well, to be human, and to be human in a responsible, intentional way. Not just to be able to get through the week or to have to cross off our list all the obligations we have, but to look forward to opening our sphere of understanding and our understanding that we are all connected. And Austin is a great place to do this, because Austin is a place. I lived in New Orleans a long time, and the first question somebody asks in New Orleans, it used to be, was, what high school did you go to when you met them, with the assumption that you were from New Orleans. The first question one certainly asks in Austin is, where are you from, with the assumption that people are from different places.
Yeah.
And the ability that we have in Austin, based on the infrastructure of Austin with academics and government and civic and religious life, is that we all, I think, are curious about each other. And there's a beautiful relationship that is one of the things that makes Austin an uncommon growing city.
One of the things I mentioned in the beginning is healing the world and the Jewish concept of tikkun olam. Can you describe that a little more and talk about how you see people actually engaging in that behavior in addition to the ways you've just mentioned? And what is the responsibility you feel and you feel others have to fight social injustice?
I think any responsible religious tradition, or faith tradition, if you will, asks us to be deployed into our own life and not just be consumers of our life, to be able to use scripture or to use example and to say, what about me? Here I am. When I was up and coming and learning about Judaism, a question a teacher once asked to the group was, who's the more important Jewish person? Abraham, the patriarch, or you? And everyone, of course, said, well, Abraham. Abraham's got a whole, retinue.
I would have said me.
And the correct answer is you, because Abraham had his shot, and now you and I have the precious days of our lives. And what do we get to do? How do we get to utilize who we are? And I think that that's what you are calling social justice and sort of working, what I would call in Judaism is just built into what it is. Judaism is governed by a system, not of laws, but of ways of living intentionally to uplift and strengthen the blessings of this world. The kingdom of heaven is not a crucial concept within Judaism. A crucial concept is, we have only these moments, what are we going to do? So the Hebrew words tikkun olam literally mean fixing or repairing the world. They actually come from a mystical concept of actually fixing and making sure that we ourselves are in balance. And we can be in balance internally. One way of doing that is being balanced out in the world and allowing what we do to be able to be resonant in the world itself. There should not be a dysfunction or a gulf between how we regard ourselves and the actions we take in the world. That's hypocrisy. The ability that we have to order ourselves from within by doing things out in the world is a central concept of what tikkun olam really means.
Thank you. That's a very interesting explanation. So, you knew this question was coming. Who are your mentors? What were the forces that shaped your life?
There's a lot of forces that have shaped my life, and
We're going to get back to the mentors too. Go ahead.
and much of that is by absence. And my dream when I was growing up in the suburbs of Chicago was that I was going to be a baseball player, believe it or not. And I had wished that I had had perhaps maybe more of a helicopter dad or a tiger mom to help me out with, well, that's your dream, son. Well, let's go get it together. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that growing up. I did have dedicated, wonderful, loving parents who helped me open up myself to dreams, but not necessarily give me the discipline to actually to doing that. However, I did find really wonderful mentors also in the music world, and one who can hold the emotions of, and I think a composer or even a conductor and a rabbi have a lot of similar function, to be able to hold a lot and to be able to interpret that in the living moment. And I think that has really carried me very much forward. And certainly in the Jewish world, I think I'm surrounded by really talented, wonderful rabbis and teachers. And in the larger Austin world, there's some amazing civic activists who are here. And my life is teeming and full of both the memories that I carry of those who have supported me growing up in my family and those who constantly inspire me as we continue to live each day together.
So you're not going to name names, are you?
Well, I could name. I mean, there's people that I know. I mean, I could tell you.
I think your answer really does cover it. So what would you say to the Neil Blumofe of pre-rabbinic or cantorial aspiration, now that you're a bit older? What would you have said to yourself back then? What lessons have you learned that you would have wanted yourself to know?
I think
Discipline you indicated, but.
Sure, I think a very distinctive answer And a very practical answer was to have learned more languages. I would have liked to have perhaps been more involved in opening up the world by learning how to communicate better. You know, I sort of dabbled in certain languages. I was able to take Latin in high school, and that was great. However, I wish I'd steeped myself more in Spanish, or learned Hebrew earlier, or Arabic, or Chinese. And I think that that would have given more of an opportunity to have seen and to have read the literature of the world, because I think, just like I like to listen to musics from all over the different regions, I think reading people's literatures gives you a great, beautiful insight into how we can continue to make connections together.
So let me ask you what might be a silly question, but I think it's one that's a lot of people facing. Why should people care about each other?
Well, I think something that would keep me up at night, for example, is, and as much as I read about history and sort of see how history really hasn't ended, whether in Europe or in America, the lessons and the traumas of those histories continue to resonate. What keeps me up at night is the understanding of how shabbily we continue to treat each other, and how fearful we are of each other, and how we modulate our fears by allowing us to close down and not engage with each other. I think the ability that we have to disarm those things gives us a sense of a richer life, gives us a sense of a better and higher purpose, so we can thrive more. And in relationship is a lot better than, I think, than us being suspicious all the time, chronically suspicious of each other. I have had the great blessing of being able to travel a lot in my life. And when I've traveled with someone else, whether they're a friend or an acquaintance, a family member, it's exponentially better than when I'm traveling, having peak experiences on my own. And I think if you can communicate that and commute that to an everyday relationship, whether we're traveling or not, whether we're just in conversation, I think is already a value added to the fiber and the fabric of our life.
Thank you for that. How would you describe your leadership style?
Well, I think that would be debatable for some.
Well, I'm not giving you my personal opinion, but how would you describe your leadership style?
Well, I do like to appreciate the gifts that others have, and just as if you were a member of a great jazz ensemble, for example, or a music ensemble or a symphony, you let section leaders lead, you allow talented technicians to do their work, and hopefully you encourage people to try their best and to recognize that they are in relationship together, not working for their own specific goal, but for the goal of the symphony or the goal of the song or the chart or of the mission that's happening. And to be able to encourage that, to lead with love, to lead with an open-heartedness, with a generosity, is most important. And perhaps the jujitsu of it all is to perhaps lead or be in a position of leadership without actively leading, if that makes sense. To be part of a team that organically works. And I think one can do that by shining light more than by determining the hierarchy of roles, saying you do what I say because I'm in this position of power, rather than let's all do this together and find ways that we can explore.
Collaboratively.
Well, I think collaborative is a word. I think also, I mean, you're not going to ignore that some people are working on one level and another,
right,
but just to appreciate the work that people do and to appreciate people for who they are, and to demonstrate in a sense that you see them and you are valued as they are valued.
So you mentioned before that your real dream initially was to become a baseball player.
Right.
We're not going to explore whether you had the talent to do that or not.
I certainly didn't.
Okay. So what made you change your mind?
To be a rabbi?
Yeah.
How did I get to be a rabbi?
Was it a lack of talent that you had no other options but become a rabbi if you don't become a baseball player?
Well, that's a great question. So from baseball, I wanted to be involved in civic engagement. So politics were actually very important to me. And at a young age, I began to work for my congressman. I was about 12 years old. And I did that all the way through about 17 or 18. And when I got to college, where I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, to see that wasn't where I needed to be, I was really much more interested in the authenticity of the moment, to be able to privilege a sense of interaction between people as opposed to pushing a particular policy. And that was for me, that's not for everyone. So the ability that I had to utilize the various interests that I have and hopefully the strengths and certainly the weaknesses that I have, to be able to find a way to manifest them with people is important. Another very important aspect of that, Barry, was when people saw me, they would assume that I was Jewish, or would learn that I was Jewish, and they would say, so you're Jewish, what do Jews think about X, Y, or Z? And at the time, I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. And I actually felt some shame, thinking that there was a void within me saying, here I am going out into the world trying to pursue all these great things of bringing community together, and at the inner sense of who I am, I don't necessarily know who I am. So there was an intentional move to try to figure that out first in order to root myself. Again, tikkun olam starts from within. Mm-hmm. And to be able to use that, to be able to use that as a strength, to be able to go out into the world confident, as opposed to just kind of blowing in the wind and seeing what other people want me to do.
What makes you so optimistic? I mean, it's kind of a terrible world we live in. What leads you to be optimistic about it?
So I've studied literature, and I'm a big fan of, and wary of at the same time, absurdist literature. And when I'm helping somebody grieve, for example, I quote to them at least the title of Samuel Beckett's story, I can't go on, I'll go on. So the ability that we have to live another day is beautiful, and what the next day may be, we're not exactly sure what it is. If one is trying to disrupt or interrupt one's habits of addiction or difficulty, one can do that only going forward. Certainly acknowledging what has been in the past. To recognize that and saying tomorrow is going to be less better than today, I think is a defeatist attitude, and I understand it, and it's a defeatist attitude, and I think that we can see each other's and help each other's resilience by encouraging each other that tomorrow will be better than before. And while that may not necessarily be totally true, I've been in Austin more than 2 decades, and I've seen very vital people confront mortality, and it's a harrowing experience to say the least. Mm-hmm. We get to be in the world as best we can, and the capacity and the drive that we have to live, I think, outweighs any of the particular moments of heartbreak that we may experience, knowing that we're not alone.
So we're running out of time, so my last question to you is, so as you're working with people in the grieving process, or you're working with people that are going through crises and trauma, what's your basic message?
We'll take one step at a time. And if we can't take one step at a time, we'll take one breath at a time. And to recognize that what you need in that particular moment may be radically different than what you may need an hour from now. And to be able to walk with, see somebody, and anticipate what they need in order to be able to recognize that the immense pain or overwhelming sense that they have that they can't go on is to be mitigated by hopefully the caring presence of not telling people it's going to get better, because I don't know that, but to say that all you have at this moment is something I'm sharing with you, and we'll take it from there and see what happens.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks.
Thank you all for watching Civil Society, and thank you to ACCTV for producing this show. You can read more about Rabbi Neil Blumofe and the topics we discussed today, and view previous episodes at nonprofitaustin.org/Civil Society. Thank you.